Hello and welcome back. My name is Yana and you're watching behind the scenes of the Forgotten Magic of Bulgaria. The Forgotten Magic of Bulgaria is a one-woman theatre show based on Bulgarian mythology and folklore, Scottish mythology and folklore, and the ways that they can interact with each other. The premiere of the show is going to be on the 28th of May in the evening at the Scottish Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh as part of the Thistles and Sunflowers Festival organised by the Bulgarian Cultural and Educational Centre in Edinburgh. So I really hope to see you there, but until then we're going to continue with these behind the scenes videos, or there are more videos about the inspiration behind the show. And today we're going to talk about the interactions between fairy tales and myths and legends and religion. So Bulgaria became a Christian country in 864 during the rule of Knyaz Boris. But this was a very politically motivated decision. Basically, all of the other powerful countries around were already Christian and Bulgaria just was falling behind. We weren't very well accepted, we weren't very well respected, and we were a major power in Europe at the time. So we kind of wanted to take our place politically on the map. And so Knyaz Boris basically made a very sensible decision that if this were to happen, if we were to be accepted by the rest of Europe, then we had to become a Christian country, even though at the time there were a lot of different religious beliefs in Bulgaria, a lot of pagan beliefs, there were some monotheistic beliefs, there were some polytheistic ones. They pretty much all lived in harmony, there wasn't really a problem, but he figured that we had to become Christians. And so that's what happened. Now, there was a lot of kind of conflict around that decision, but as far as ordinary people in small villages, just everyday Bulgarians were concerned, it's easy to imagine that for some of them, this decision had a little bit less of an impact on their everyday lives. There was suddenly this new thing, they were being told, okay, now so you're going to believe in this one God and his son Jesus and all of those things. And it's kind of easy to imagine that these people who had other things to do with their lives, they had to survive, they had to take care of their farms and their villages and their families. They kind of just shrugged their shoulders and were like, okay, all right, there's this new thing, we're going to incorporate it into what we already believe. And so the new Christian figures and characters and symbols kind of meshed together with stuff that was already there, with older myths and legends, with stories much more resembling fairy tales. And very, very interesting kind of narratives came out of this that are a lot more like what you'd expect from old pagan beliefs than Christianity, except they star God and Jesus and some of the recognizable saints. And I've always found these stories really fascinating and a lot of the time very amusing. So I'm going to share a few of them with you today. I'm going to be directly translating, so it's not going to be very smooth, so I hope you excuse me. This first one is about how land and the world was just generally created. Now in this story, God and the devil are kind of sort of frenemies. They are a little bit antagonistic towards each other, but they do seem to be kind of buddies in a way as well. So God and the devil were having a little bit of a chat about how they could create land. And so the devil didn't believe in God's power, but God was like, no, listen, I'm gonna show you I can do this. Go and fetch me some sea foam from where the different seas meet. So at this point there's no land anywhere, it's all seas, but apparently you can distinguish between the different seas, so it appears from this text. So the devil went and grabbed some sea foam from where the seas met, and he brought it back to God. And God took the sea foam and started shaping it, and then kind of just threw it out onto the sea, and it became land, and it started expanding. So first it only expanded as much as like maybe just like a town square. And at this point, God was like, okay, I like this, and he planted a walnut tree in the middle of this just circle of land. And then he took a golden swing, he hung it on the tree, and he started swinging. Because God in this story has a little bit of a kind of like a carefree, childish personality, which I think is really sweet. So he started swinging on the swing, and he was swinging, and he eventually fell asleep. So at this point, the devil, being really mischievous, decided that he was going to drown God, which sounds very dark and horrible, but kind of from the tone of the story, I think we're supposed to assume that these are all celestial beings, and I don't know if I'm supposed to think that anybody can actually die for real. They certainly don't seem to take it very seriously from their conversations. Either way, the devil unhooked the swing from the walnut tree, and he decided to take God together with the swing to carry him all the way to the edge of the land, so that he could throw him into the water and drown him. So he tried to do that, and he walked with the swing, and he walked with the swing, but no matter how much he walked, he could never reach the edge of the land. It just kept expanding in all directions, and so he walked that way, so it just kept expanding everywhere. So eventually God woke up, and he was like, hey, what are you doing? And the devil, apparently being extremely honest, just immediately confessed and was like, hey, I had this plan to drown you, but you know, I can't find the edge of the land. And God was like, haha, you never find it, it's not gonna happen, look at how great my power is. And so the devil's plan was thwarted. And then God kind of continued on with creation now that he'd had a little nap. And then after the walnut that he had already planted and created, he started creating other types of plants and herbs and trees, and then finally he created man and all the other animals. And man was made out of clay. So God made his body out of clay, as happens in so many mythologies, and he left him there to dry in the sun, and he walked away. What he did at that time, I have no idea, maybe he was just having a walk. And so the devil kind of came by, and wanting again to cause mischief, grabbed a stick and started poking holes into this clay body, and he poked 41 holes into the body of what I think we are supposed to assume was Adam. And so when God returned, he saw the holes, he figured out what had happened. For some reason, rather than just repairing the holes with more mud or just doing something else, just using his superpowers to repair the damage, he started grabbing random plants and herbs from around him, and he stuffed the holes with these plants. And this is how we ended up with today's medicinal herbs. And basically, in whatever place on the body that hole was, the herb that was used to plug that hole is now the kind of herb that we can use to treat illnesses of that part of the body. So he stuffed some herbs into 40 of these holes, but he left the final one, the 41st one, he left it open. And then he brought Adam to life and let him go. And so the devil was like, hey, I don't get it. Why did you leave that final hole open? And then God was like, well, we're going to leave this one open. This final one is going to be death. This is how the soul is going to leave the body through that final hole. So a little bit of a kind of like a dark turn to this particular story at the end there, but also kind of philosophical. I quite like it. I particularly, there's a lot of these, a lot of similar ones that kind of use the same tropes. I really like the kind of, it's an interesting dynamic between God and the devil, because they are antagonistic, but they also don't seem to actually really hate each other. There's kind of like almost an implied awareness that they need each other, that they're both necessary to the world. Now, obviously gods and demons and that sort of thing, they're in a lot of mythologies, and it's a little bit less strange to read about them in these circumstances. But I think it's a lot more interesting when you literally mention Jesus in it. And I do have a favorite story about him as well here. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. Yeah. So this one. Before the sky and the celestial bodies and all of the world as we know it today was made, Jesus Christ was already born. Don't ask how, I don't know. But he was already there, and at that point he was a toddler. And because he was a toddler, he was clinging to his dad the whole time, just walking with him, just clinging to his robe. And God didn't want him to do that the whole time. It's not necessarily implied that he was annoyed, but I think he just wanted his son to be a little more independent. And so he set him down on the ground, and he was like, listen, Jesus, you're gonna play by yourself here, okay? You're gonna leave daddy alone for a little bit. I'm gonna go do my thing. I'm gonna go do some chores and run some errands, and you're gonna play by yourself. So God walked away, left Jesus to play by himself. And so Jesus did, and he didn't have too much around to play with, so basically he just started digging through the mud. Again, mud is a big thing in like these old myths and legends. And so he started playing with the mud, and he started making it into bowls, as little children do. So eventually God returned, and he was like, oh my God, what have you done? What have you... I don't know if he said, oh my God, he probably didn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did in a story such as this. What have you done? Why are you covered in mud? What is happening? And Jesus was like, well, Daddy, you told me to play, so I've made some bowls out of mud, and I'm gonna play with them. And God was like, okay, I mean, that seems fun. You've made some, these are really nice. Well done, son. Good job. These are nice, big, solid bowls of mud. And how are you gonna play with them? And Jesus was like, well, I'm gonna throw them in the air and catch them. It's gonna be really fun. And so God was like, okay, I'm gonna make this even more fun for you. Okay, so grab the biggest one and just throw it as high in the air as you possibly can. And so little Jesus grabbed the biggest bowl and he threw it as high as he could in the air. And God used his powers to make it go higher and higher and higher, and then he made it glow, and then it stuck up there and it didn't come down. And this big bowl of mud became the sun. And so Jesus was very amused and very happy with this, and God was like, okay, let's do the same thing with the other bowls. But at this point Jesus was like, okay, we'll do that, I'll throw them up. But can we make sure that they're not as bright as this one, because this one's too bright, it's hurting my eyes, I can't even look at it. And so God was like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll make sure they're not as bright. So Jesus threw the rest of the balls up, and one of them became the moon, and the rest of them became the stars. And this is how we got the celestial bodies, created by little baby toddler Jesus playing in the mud. Again, I really like this story because I think it's very sweet, it's very wholesome, and it's great imagining God as a slightly exasperated father. And the final story I'm going to retell for you involves Saint John, and it's about why sex exists today. So after Grandpa God, and this is a thing in Bulgarian, we, especially when you talk to children, but not only, we often call him Grandpa God. So after Grandpa God created humans and Earth and all of that, all of the saints gathered together. Not sure why the saints existed already at the time, I think they're supposed to show up later in Christianity, but again, this is another example of just meshing things together just to make an interesting story. So all of the saints in heaven gathered together to decide how humans were going to reproduce. And they talked about it for a while and they decided, well, it's going to work like this, right? Man and woman are just going to look at each other and poof, there's going to be a baby. This is how it's going to work. And so, you know, happy with their decision, they sat down to have dinner, and Saint John was the cook and in charge of setting the table and all of that. And so he brought them some dishes. They started on the soup, and they realized that the soup was lacking in salt. It was very, very bland, it wasn't well seasoned. So they complained about that, and they were like, hey John, can you put some salt into the soup? So Saint John took a pinch of salt, and he kind of waved his hand above the pot of soup, but he didn't actually put any salt in, he just kind of looked at it. And so they tasted it again, and they were like, well, it's still bland, can you put some salt in? So he did the same thing a second time, still didn't work, they tested it again. So then finally the third time he actually put the salt in, and the rest of the saints were like, but yeah, it's okay now, it's well seasoned. And so he was like, okay, well, the first 2 times, why didn't it work? Why weren't you happy with it? And they were like, well, that's because you didn't actually put anything in there, you were just kind of just looking at it. And he was like, aha. So then if you can't even make the soup work by just looking at it, how is it supposed to work? How are you supposed to create a child with just one look? And so the rest of the saints were like, this makes sense. And this is why sex exists today, because looking just isn't enough. This is all we have time for in this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!